the Honorable Vice President of India, Shri Jagdeep Dhankarji, the author of this book, Shri Ram Madhav, Shri Suresh Prabhu, and Shri Shyam Saranji. May I commence by complimenting Shri Ram Madhav on his latest book that is both expansive in its exposition and incisive in its analysis. From the individuality of the early human to the social contract of conservatism juxtaposed against wokeism, this book covers a diverse array of topics, all discussed in great detail and analyzed in a very objective manner. My profound congratulations to Diksha, Shri Ram Madhav's daughter, who stepped in to do the heavy lifting to bring this work to fruition. Daughters are indeed special. As it is with all delectable menus, and so is it with books, there are certain partakings that you may savor, and others that may not be so appetizing to the palate. But that is the nature of the discourse, and that is the nature of scholarship when it is presented in a very cogent and articulate manner. As Mr. Ram Madhav outlines in the preface of his book, this book is all about the experience of the outgoing liberal world order built by the West and the possible shape that the incoming one will take. In other words, the moot question is, to paraphrase what Antonio Gramsci had written about a century ago, is the post-World War II order dead and the new one yet to be conceived, and therefore do we exist in the age of monsters? Or are we back to the old order as it was conceived in the 17th and the 18th centuries? The latter seems to be more the case. Given Ram Madhavji's estoppel about not discussing the contents of the book in great detail, which I think is injustice to an author, because ultimately it is upon the readers to really read the book in its entirety and come to their own conclusions. Let me then try and present an alternative scenario which may be food for thought for Mr. Ram Madhav's next scholarship. As we speak, as Mr. Shyam Saran and Mr. Suresh Prabhu were rightly pointing out, there are unprecedented trade tensions across the world triggered by President Trump's attempt to restructure the international architecture of commerce. The Russia-Ukraine war that began in the February of 2022, the Israel-Hamas/Hezbollah/Houthi-Iran conflict that broke out in the October of 2023, and the rise of China over the past 3 decades that has attained portentous overtones in large parts of the world beyond the immediate Chinese realms in North Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. The added dynamic is the latest India-Pakistan standoff, the worst after the Kargil war 26 years ago, and now the US bombing of Iran. Modern strategic thought is essentially a European construct because of the experimentation with ideas and the impulses of colonialism. As Mr. Madhav rightly points out on page 18 of the introduction of his book, that the arrival of printing in Europe animated Renaissance, Reformation, and other humanist movements. In addition to this, it also gave structure to contemporary strategic canons. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 sanctified the construct of a nation-state. Cardinal de Richelieu, the first minister of France from 1624 to 1642, and a prince of the church, propounded the concept of raison d'etre, namely that each state Each nation acts in its own best national interest. It was closely followed by the doctrine of balance of power, the alliance system conceptualized by Hugo Grotius and first put into practice by William of Orange, later King William III of England between 1688 and 1730. These three doctrinal templates laid the foundational stencil of international relations that is kosher even today. This was followed by the Concert of Vienna in 1815, where these three hypotheses were tested. It ensured an uneasy peace for the next 99 years, when there was no general European war till the beginning of the First World War, except for the Crimean Wars from 1854 to 1856. In the May of 1892, in a memorandum to the Russian Foreign Minister Nikolai Gills, the Adjutant General of the Russian Army, Nikolai Obachev, explained why the traditional method of determining casus belli of war had been overtaken by modern technology. What mattered most now was who mobilized first and not who fired the first shot. The undertaking of mobilization cannot be considered as a peaceful act. On the contrary, he opined it represented the most decisive act of war. On 28th of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was assassinated. Within a month, the doomsday machine of general mobilization coupled with raison d'etre unleashed itself on Europe. Once Austria, Hungary and Germany started to mobilize, other European powers followed suit and World War I commenced. By 1918, this Armageddon had left 17 million people dead. The Second World War was triggered by the imperatives of the alliance system. In 1938, German troops annexed Austria before occupying Sudetenland, a part of German-speaking Czechoslovakia. However, when the Nazis marched into Poland on September 1st, 1939, Great Britain, according to the terms of the Anglo-Polish Act, declared war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939. France followed suit, and the war dominoes were in full play. By the time it was all over in 1945, 85 million people were dead, and large parts of the world lay in ruins. It was followed by the Cold War. Both these templates, the templates of raison d'etre and the alliance system, were carried forward into the Cold War till the time the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The short point that I am trying to make is that if you look at the world as it stands today, when the old order or the post-World War II order seems to wither and a new one struggles to replace it, the moot question that we have to address ourselves to is, are we really moving into a new world order, or are we regressing backwards into an order which is going to be defined purely by the imperatives of national interests of various nations and the alliances that they are able to build along them? The experience between the end of the Cold War and 2025, when you had semi-state actors who challenged the sovereignty of states, actually proves this point that when confronted with an existential challenge, nations do not tend to rely on multilateralism. Nations tend to act in individualistic, unipolar manner, which they think best suits or best defines their national interest. While there may be a lot of disagreement today with the manner in which certain states are acting, and there would be obviously larger implications of those actions on the world in the decades to come, but the fundamental point still remains that why have these states chosen to junk that entire multilateral system, which they had so assiduously constructed after the end of the Second World War, when it came to what they think are their own survival and their own existential questions. And this has been both the strength and the continuum of Indian foreign policy, which Mr. Shyam Saran very, very rightly referred to. And so therefore, if you go back to the genesis of the Indian Republic in 1947, you essentially have two imperatives playing themselves out when Prime Minister Nehru took over the reins of office. The one was raison d'etre that India's sovereignty has to be saved by acting in its own best interest. And number two, given the division of the world into two power blocks, we needed to build a system of alliances, which was then called non-alignment, and today is called multi-alignment. So therefore, there has been a continuum now going back 7.5 decades. And therefore, I would like to conclude by saying that this work by Mr. Ram Madhav, where he has spelled out the continuity and the departures in our foreign policy as we look towards an uncertain world and an uncertain future, is something which is a must read for any scholar of international affairs. And I think it will help deepen the understanding of people who study international relations, who have an interest in strategic affairs, that they will be able to feel the stones and try and fathom for themselves whether a new world order will in fact emerge in the coming years and decades ahead. I would once again like to thank Mr. Ram Madhav for inviting me to this book launch, and would like to once again congratulate him on his scholarship. Thank you very much.